Today we're doing right hand picking techniques. So it's mostly just going to be focused on this guy over here, picking hand. So why is it important? Well, it's the hand that makes the sound. It's the one that plugs the strings, and you can pluck it soft or plug it a little bit harder. So there's all kinds of dynamics or variations in sound that you get out of your picking hand, and it also helps with your creativity because the more in control and the not necessarily faster, but just more in control that you get with it, the more you can expand your playing and use it to improve other aspects like your scale or chord knowledge, your rhythm technique, songwriting, things like that. And then it helps with learning new songs. You don't have to worry about where your picking hand's going if you have control over it. All right, so just a summary of some of the topics. So basically, I'm just going to split it up into 4 ways. I'm going to go, basically, it's going to be all around like a way to just move across the strings. And you can move, I'm going to split it up into 1 note per string, 2 notes per string, 3 notes per string, and we'll get into a little bit of the weeds there. And then kind of 4 note per string stuff to kind of end it, but there's all kinds of stuff there. And just a brief intro into some more advanced ways you can use this in combination with your fretting hand to sort of make it a little more economic, a little just play with it in different ways and how to creatively practice all this stuff. So basically, this is going to be really boring for people who've been playing guitar for a while, but just how to hold the pick. Let's talk about that. So first of all, just your hand placement on the board. I just like to come with my arm relaxed, just diagonally over the strings, and just laying it flat like that. And I make a little bit of an okay symbol. I used to keep my fingers in, but sometimes it's in, sometimes it's out. But the main way I hold the pick is when I hold it, I'm really poking out as little of the edge of the pick as I can. And that just gives me a little bit more control. And I always use the analogy of using a pen or a pencil. Like when you hold a pen, you don't hold it like this because you don't have really much control. Like try writing your name like that. You hold it down here by the tip, and it just gives you a little bit more control, and all kinds of artistic writing abilities. So it's kind of the same way. I also use picks with this one's kind of rounded out because I've used it so much, but it usually has like a little bit of a pick on there. So probably like your starter picks or picks you usually pick up at the store will have sort of a rounded off edge, almost a blunted edge. But I really like the pointed edge because I can just get a little bit on the string and get a decent sound without much force. All right, so enough of that. So basically, we're starting, you can divide up picking in 2 ways. There's only 2 ways you can hit the string. You go down into the string, that's called a down pick or downstroke. I'm gonna roll back my volume a little bit. And then we have an upstroke, where depending on where you're going, like if you're playing up here, obviously you can get a little bit more of an arc. But probably the starter exercise, and I call this like one of my couch exercises, is you just sit on the couch and you just play an open E, downstroke, And you just try and push yourself with all of these. Just try and push the speed. When you start pushing the speed, sometimes you'll flub, but it's all right. Just keep going, and you'll get better at it the more you try it. The other one, you know, to practice upstrokes, you can either practice it, well, you can really practice any of these on any string. Like I can practice downstrokes here. Here, and I can practice upstrokes anywhere. All right, so downstrokes, upstrokes. Then combining them, down, up, that's where you get your alternate picking. So that would be couch exercise number 2, just combining downstrokes and upstrokes. Down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. And the best way to do this is just really try and keep it steady, keep a steady beat. Don't just try and like, don't just try and run before you walk, and you know, just try and be a speed demon and sacrifice your technique or whatever. But yeah, so just the basic exercises, and this is all in the School of Rock method. Just downstrokes, upstrokes, and then alternate picking. All right. So the tip I would give for this is to make it a little bit more creative, you know, is just don't just try it with the open strings, try it anywhere on the board. All right. So now we're going to go into our first topic, which is one note per string. So the most often this is used is when you're playing arpeggios. So like probably asking like what the is an arpeggio? But all an arpeggio is just taking simple chord, and I'll adjust the camera a little bit. Just taking a simple chord like say E minor, and just playing it one note at a time. All right, you can see the. Okay, so what you do with the picking hand is you can either play a chord all together. It's what I've heard called a stack chord. There's probably other ways of naming it. And then split up, which would be our arpeggio. So the thing with the pick is I'm not coming out and like picking every note, or what I like to call stabbing the notes, where you're like kind of, you know, bringing your hand out and all that. That's not the most economical way to do it. The best way to kind of move through chords and arpeggios is I just like to push the pick through. So you see, I get really close, I'm picking it, and then it sort of just winds up resting on the next string down, and it's ready to go again. And you're just kind of slightly pushing it. See that? It's just slightly pushing down, and then it flicks back and makes a sound. Takes a little bit to get a hang of because you don't want to do it too hard, or else it like buzzes like crazy. That's no bueno. You just want to gently run your pick through there and just try and keep a steady motion. But it can also help to, you know, try a lot of different other ways. So another couch exercise I like is I just cut the strings like this so it doesn't annoy my roommates or my dog or anybody I might be playing around at the time, instead of just doing that for like 10 minutes. You just cut the strings and mute them and just go back and forth. When I go down through the strings, I'm sort of using the flattened part of my pick like that. And then when I'm coming back up, I either go flat again, or I sometimes will sort of use more the edge of my pick just to get a different sound. Gives a little thinner sound, but depends on what you like. You know, if you like a thick sound, use more of the flat part of your pick. If you like sort of a thin, almost scooped kind of sound, you can use the edge of your pick. So best tip is just take besides this, is to just take a simple chord from your vocabulary, like A minor or some other cowboy chord, like G, C, D, and just run through the strings slow. It's like the basis of every 80s power metal or metal 80s metal ballad ever, is just a lot of arpeggiated chords. All right, moving on. So 2 notes per string. The best tip I can give first is if you don't know your pentatonic patterns, or you don't know like a 2 note per string scale, learn it, because that's probably the best advice, is to learn the scale first and then worry about picking it. But let's see, how about we try, let's just try E minor pentatonic up at the 12th fret. All right, so that would be, we got 2 notes per string here. So we're going 12, 15, 12, 14, 12, 14, 12, 14, 12, 15, and 12, 15. And there's all kinds of other patterns that you can learn. But since each string has 2 notes through the scale, we need to figure out how do we want to pick that. So there's 2 real ways you can pick it. The first way is obviously with alternate picking, where you're going down, up on the 2nd note, and then crossing over to the next string with the downstroke. So you're going down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. And then when you're coming back down, you're reversing it. So you're going up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Both take kind of a little bit of time to really get the feel of, but once you sort of, you're like, okay, I know where I gotta go now. That's when it starts getting a little bit smoother, a little more in time, things like that. So that's another way, a good way to just start practicing your scale. You don't really want to worry about picking patterns when you're first learning a scale. Just downstroke everything. And then if you want to come back up with all downstrokes, that works too, or upstrokes. I'm actually trying to work on my upstrokes a little bit, so I've been playing that little pattern. So all kinds of ways you can move through these scales. This is not a comprehensive way of moving through scales. I'm just giving some examples. The other way, and we can include our fretting hand a little bit, is with some hammer-ons and pull-offs. So if you don't know what a hammer-on and pull-off is, basically hammer-on is you're picking a note below and hammering on, kind of using your fretting hand to slap onto a note above, just like that. And then a pull-off would be the opposite. So you're like starting on the upper note and kind of flicking off. It should be called a flick off because that's sort of what you're doing. You're not just lifting your finger off. It's a little weak. When you flick it, that's when you kind of get that illusion that you're picking the note. So that enables us to just pick one note and then let our fretting hand get the rest of it. And that allows our picking hand to cross over a little bit easier like this. Notice how I used kind of the picking through 1 note per string thing. Then upstrokes going back down. And then, you know, you can, there's all kinds of variations with that. all sorts of fun stuff you can do. But just going through learning your pentatonic patterns, just playing through that, and then worry about the picking patterns. Yep, hammer-ons and pull-offs. So a good hammer-on and pull-off exercise is just picking, hammer-on, picking, hammer-on, with all different kinds of fingers. So you see I'm kind of droning the 5 on the 5th fret on the low E. I'm just going 5, 6, 5, 7, 5, 8. And then the other way would be 8, 7, 8, 6, 8, 5. All right, so hammer on. And then combining them, that's what we like to call trills. So we're going like, if I go between 5 and 8, we're going 5. Sort of like when I hear that, I think like the flying monkeys from Wizard of Oz. So just keep it slow, you know, and then take it at hyper speed if you can. Just all right. So that's kind of more a left-hand technique though, but I just wanted to introduce it because there's a way you can take all of these and make them one note per string. Like, so you're only picking one note, and then you can use hammer-ons and pull-offs to make them, you get a little bit smoother sound, and then learning how to pick them too just helps you vary up your sound a little bit more. Because a lot of people will either favor one or the other. So a lot of people will either like pick everything, or they'll hammer on and pull off everything, or what we call legato. But the really good players are the ones that do both. They kind of flirt with both in real time almost. So that brings us into our next thing is 3-note per string. So this is probably the most in-depth one we're going to do. I'm going to try and spend a little bit more time on this because there's a lot to go over. But basically 3-note per string, we're basically playing in triplets. All right, so if you don't know what triplets are, but the way I really think about them is just fitting 3 notes within one beat. You know, that's a simple way of looking at it. It's obviously not the only way of looking at it, but basically we just have a steady beat. I'm fitting 3 notes in between each beat. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. All right, so fitting that in, you can start with just taking your low E exercise, and a really cool thing is doing triplets down there. And it also sounds really cool when you use palm muting, where you're just taking the side of your hand on your pinky side and just laying it sort of flat, or, you know, depending on where I'm playing, keep it a little bit diagonally, but I just rest it across the strings really close to the bridge, or as close to the bridge as I'm comfortable with getting. So with triplets and palm muting, that sounds like this. A lot of Iron Maiden there, a lot of stuff playing in triplets. But that's a good way to get started with it before you start adding any left-hand notes. Just get that down and just practice moving it through the strings. So what are the ways we can move it through the strings? So the first way, and probably the easiest way, but also kind of the hardest to explain, is what's called economy picking. And there's really 2 ways I sort of use economy picks. So I'll just use like a higher C. just to keep it in the camera frame. I'm going to go 15, 16, 17, all the way across the strings. All right. So we have 3 notes per string. All right. So when you start looking at odd picking patterns, that's when the stroke that you're going to hit the next string differs. Like if we were to do strict alternate picking, and we'll just do this really slow, we'd have to go down, up, down, and then cross over. If we want to do strict alternate picking, go up, down, up, then crossing back over, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. If anybody needs me to go over that again, any of this again, I'm going to leave some space for some questions at the end. So for economy picking, what you're basically doing is no matter where you end on the string, you're starting out with a downstroke. And this kind of gives a little bit different sound. It gives a little bit more percussive sound when you're still starting each string with a downstroke or upstroke. So slowly that looks like this. And then I'll go back down. All right, so it's kind of a combination of the 1 note per string stuff we were looking at and then the triplets. So the triplets are still there. The triplet, down, up, down. But on that second down, we're doing our kind of incorporating our 1 note per string technique and going down, up, down, and pushing through to the next string. See that? Same thing on the way up. Whoops. So it's a little, all of these are going to be a little awkward at first. So I feel like I'm going to be a broken record with that. But this is sort of weird to get a handle on. This is actually the first sort of way I learned how to play scales, or at least I wasn't really taught that way, but I eventually learned it's a way. It is an established way to move through the strings. So I wasn't coming up with anything new. It was alternate picking, strict alternate picking that really did me in, or took a lot of time to kind of get my hands around. So with strict alternate picking, if we just look through the strings, you know, again, we have to alternate the pattern, all right? So it basically goes between D-U-D or dud. This is so dumb. My weird things names I give to things. Dud and udo, where we're going down, down, and up, down, up. All right. So dud, move to the next string. Udo, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. All right. So there's a couple basic ways to play that. Let's talk about the difference between outside and inside picking. So that's just 2 ways of talking about strict alternate picking, because it's what stroke you start on that makes the difference. So outside picking would be, you know, basically you're moving outside 2 strings. So if I just took a simple 2-note 6 or 2 strings 6-note phrase, see how I'm kind of moving, I'm crossing between these 2 strings. So I'm working the outside of them. Down, up, down, up, down, up. All right, so inside picking would be the reverse. You wind up playing in between 2 strings, and this can be really awkward at first. So you're going up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. So if I move through the strings with each one, I usually like doing outside picking when I'm ascending, and then I like doing inside picking when I'm descending, because then I can basically start each new string with an upstroke with the usual pattern I do. So I usually just start each pattern on the next string. So I'll go, whoop. See that? Down, up, down, up, down, up. And then when you start the descending phrase with the upstroke, you wind up being able to pick inside on the way down. So we're going down, up, down, up, down, up, sort of flipping everything on its head. Whoops. Messed up a little bit because I'm like looking at the camera, make sure I'm in frame. It's awkward. More about outside, inside picking. So that would be strict alternate picking. Now, economy picking, again, another part of economy picking is combining it with the legato and hammer-on stuff that we talked about earlier. And that would just be where you're picking the note once and then hammering on or pulling off twice. Right? So 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. A little bit of and just picking each note once or each string once. That takes some time. So let's talk about some patterns we can do for our triplets. All right, so what I was doing before was just really simple, 1, 2, 3. Like if you're in between two boxes, that's a good place to start. Let's start on the 7, 9 box. And like I did up here, we're just going 7, 8, 9 across the board. I'm gonna turn it a little bit. All right, and you can do what I like to do is I like to do both combinations of 3 fingers. Just to give your pinky some work with it too, in case you wind up there. And then I just basically move different fingers around, and I get different things. So if I do index, middle, pinky, I get sort of this minor sound. So that would just be 5, 6, 8 across all 6 strings. Whoops. All right. And then you got index, ring, pinky. And then you can start spreading it out. It's sort of a 2-note or 5 frets altogether, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but you're splitting it up between 3 fingers. So depending on where I am, because I have little tiny hands, if you haven't noticed, but I'll usually do, if I'm on higher up on the fretboard, I'll usually do index, ring, pinky, and spread out my pinky and ring like that. And then when I'm down here, I'll usually do index, middle, pinky. You can just practice going across the board at first. A good thing to do to work on that stretch is to do like a 2-note, make a 2-note per string exercise out of it. And then just work through the work through the boxes with all these. That's probably the best place to start. And then this one's a little bit, don't worry about that one. So there's all kinds of different 3-note per string combinations. So I'll spend a lot of time on that. Like 90% of my playing, it seems, is in triplets. And then you can just keep spreading it out to your fingers' ability. So a good way to practice stretching is to just see where your fingers can stretch. And at different parts of the neck. Because the more you can spread out, you know, the more ground you can cover in one time, and it just helps with your finger dexterity. But if it hurts, stop. Don't hurt your fingers. All right, so how am I doing on time? Got about, oh, we started a little bit late, but got about 30 minutes. Cool. So last topic, we talked about 1 note per string, 2 notes per string, and 3 notes per string. Oh, I didn't go over this. A good way to practice 3 notes per string is start trying to incorporate some of the patterns into your pentatonics. So if I have like a B minor pentatonic like this, you know, and I just add some notes and turn them into 3-note patterns, I can turn into a whole bunch of stuff. A lot of different stuff you can play with that. So 4 note per strings. 4 notes per string. That's I kind of just think about this in terms of chromatics. So what is a chromatic? Like just a chromatic scale, which would just be all 12 notes in music. So if I were to just go from, a good way to visualize it on the guitar is we have our open string E, and then we have this little 2-dot fret up at the 12th fret, all right? So 12th fret, 12 tones of music, that is the next iteration of our E. If we're on the E string, that's our octave E, all right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And same thing on each string. All right, so in the chromatic scale, or in music in general, we have 12 notes. We have 7 natural notes that we're familiar with because of our alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. There's no H note, there's no I note, there's no Z note, just A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And then we have 5 sharps and flats. A sharp / B flat, G sharp / A flat, C sharp / D flat, D sharp / E flat, and F sharp / G flat. So we have 7 natural notes plus 5 sharps and flats. That gives us 12 total notes in music. All right. So with chromatics, you know, some of these exercises, they're not going to be a strict chromatic scale. It's going to give you that kind of angular, sort of weird, not sure where it's going kind of feel. But a good way to get started with chromatics is to do probably a warm-up exercise that you're familiar with if you've taken lessons in our program, or you've looked up other people's kind of lessons or warm-ups or things like that. But a lot of guitarists, they'll warm up with this exercise where you're just doing 4 notes per string, all right? And you're using each one of your fingers. So you're just going index, middle, ring, pinky, all over all the strings. And since we're back to an even number of notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, we're going to be doing an even amount of pick strokes. I'm going to shift my camera a little bit. We're going to be doing 1, 2, 3, 4 pick strokes. So that's bringing us back to kind of this directional picking that we've gone through. Because we're going to go down, up, and start the next string with the down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, down, down. Same thing up, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that exercise slow, if nobody's familiar with it, because we're just going, I'll turn 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we're coming back down. 4, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, and then, oh, I'm done with that. Nope, no, you're not, because the best way to do it is to shift positions and go through each one of the positions or the frets. You can think of it that way. So once you get done with this, go 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. All right. So that's the basic premise. And you go up and you go up. And I usually go until I can't go no more. I go up to here. And then I've completely tortured myself with a bunch of different variations over the years and things like that. Just like, oh, what if I changed it to this? Like, one way to change the variation is you start with an upstroke instead of a downstroke. So that makes every next string have to start with an upstroke. And that sounds like this. Whoops. All right, and then you're going down, down, up, down, up, down. All right, and then there's a whole bunch of stuff. You know, you can change the pattern with the left hand. You can reverse it, so you can go. Right, and then you're moving through all the frets and the strings that way. All kinds of different stuff. I'll go across one string to work on my position shifting. It's where you're just going shifting up. And then coming back. And then you reverse it going up. And you might think like, oh, what is the point of doing that? Like when I reverse it, for instance, it makes me practice hitting that next note in the pattern with my pinky, which, you know, I don't know if you've ever looked at your hand. Your pinky's kind of small compared to these other guys. It's shorter and skinnier, and it's a weak little boy. It's like the littlest brother, and he just gets picked on, and you know, he doesn't get picked for any sports or anything. So there's all kinds of little variations with that. I'll go diagonally. All kinds of different stuff. I'll work on my hammer-ons and pull-offs with them, because that's a good way to get a hammer-on and pull-off exercise with all your fingers. You can go a little bit faster with hammer-ons and pull-offs too. That's another benefit for them. People who can do hammer-ons and pull-offs really well, you know, you have a lot of times we can have problems like trying to figure out what they're doing because their hammer-ons might be so like crisp and clean that, you know, you almost can't tell the difference between a hammer-on note and a pick note. So it's a lot of really cool stuff. So like hammer-ons and pull-offs would just be pick, hammer-on, hammer-on, hammer-on. Another way is a lot of these exercises sound a lot cooler with palm muting. So like just the difference between, especially when you get into higher settings, the notes will start to blend together, like higher gain or more overdrive. The notes will start to blend together. Hear that? It's not really quite as crisp as I want it. So when I do palm muting, just tightens it up a little bit, right? And that can extend your scales too. Versus a little bit open, you know, different opinions for different people, you know. Some people might hate that sound. Or maybe they just might hate it coming from me because I'm like looking at the screen and I'm not. A lot of different ways you can pick through these. And that's kind of a creative exercise. That's a good way to get creative with it. Try it either with open picking or close picking. Just different sounds, different options, different creative outlets. That's what all this is about. So yeah, so just variations are important because, you know, you don't, if you just spend all your time playing like, and then, you know, a riff you hear requires you to go pick with an upstroke or cross a string or something like that, that can be difficult. All right, so that's basically all for the picking. And then again, like just variations. So there's a ton of different stuff you can still do with your picking hand. Maybe we'll go over tapping last. So the one note per string stuff, the arpeggio picking. You'll hear a lot of people talk about what's called sweep picking. And basically all it is you're just doing the directional picking with some chords. All right, so you just take a simple chord. You're just going. Something like that. So you just map out a chord that you like. Maybe a little bit better than that. And stuff like that. And you're just going down and up. The trick is to like kind of match match each note with a pick, you know, because sometimes either you'll like get a little sloppy with the picking or you'll be not catch the note in time. So it's hard to get a hand of at first, but and it sort of has become this shredder sort of competition. It's like how fast you can sweep. Don't fall into that. Just learn how to do it and work on playing it musically instead of just trying to be like, oh, look what I can do. Hybrid picking, and we'll sort of fan it out into finger picking. Hybrid picking sounds pretty cool, right? All you're doing is you're just picking and you're using another finger at the same time. So a good way to practice this is you just assign your finger to one string and picking hand to one string, and your fretting or your plucking finger to another, and just drone something. So like here, I'm just gonna drone the A, and I'm gonna pluck some notes off of the D string. So that allows you, if you have a phrase where you're crossing over strings quickly, that allows you to just keep your pick in one spot, and then you use your fingers to do other ones. And you certainly don't have to just keep it to the middle finger. You can use your other fingers too, like if I were to just play like a simple chord. So if I were to use all 4 of my fingers, or all 3 of my other fingers, because my index finger is picking, obviously. Let's see if I can set this. All right, see that? So I'm going pick, index, ring, pinky. You can just move that around, and it enables you to sort of move through strings a little different, and sounds a little different, and it's a little bit easier once you get the hang of it, instead of having to figure out, like, it kind of just throws everything we've just done out the window, because it's like, oh, I can just use my fingers for each string instead of having to cross over, do both. And then hybrid pick, you know, if you take the pick away, then you just have regular finger picking. So the best way to go through all this stuff, anything that involves groups of strings, whether it be hybrid picking or arpeggio picking or finger playing, you just pick a simple chord, and you just practice picking a different way. And then with the then you can practice it the other way. This one's a little bit more difficult because you have to start with your pinky and then end with a downstroke. Or you do you know, if you want to end with an upstroke, that's fine. I like ending with a downstroke. All right, so remember, hybrid picking, just combination of picking and your fingers, not rocket science. Then finger playing, there's a whole bunch of different finger playing books. There's a ton of different people that can explain it way better than I can. But if we were to play this A minor, you know, with our fingers, you got to think about the chord a little bit. You know, remember with the A chord, any A chord, our root's going to be on A, all right? So if we have it in the open position, best place to start is the open A string. So you assign each one of your fingers, or at least I like to, kind of assign each one of your fingers, and you touch them, and you sort of push on them, just get a grip on them. And, all right? And that's the way I have to pluck it, because I don't have any nails on the end of my fingers right now, because I don't really do much finger picking like that. So I just use kind of the meat. If you don't have the nails, you can just use sort of the meat on the tips of your fingers. It gives a little bit duller sound, but it works. What else are we doing? Tapping. Tapping should basically just be called picking hand hammer-ons, all right? Because that's all it is. You're just using your hand to hammer on or flick off a note. All right, so there's a couple ways to start with this. A good way to start is just practice slapping the note on their right and getting a nice clear tone. So you might want to pick which finger you pick. I try and work with both both my index and my middle, because sometimes I like to cut my pick in my hand when I tap, and sometimes I like to keep it in my hand, and if I have to switch back quickly, and I'll use my middle finger, like if I have to get back quick. So basically, you can practice it with your, basically do everything with it. You can practice doing your one tap per string, I guess, and then we can do it with our pentatonics. Yeah. So with the pull off, it's a little bit weird because you're kind of flicking your finger back in, and it can be difficult not to hit the next string. Hear that? So you can accidentally graze the next string. But that's a very brief intro. There's a ton of tapping videos on YouTube. Don't really want to get too deep into that. And then last thing is the palm muting, and then learning how to mute the other strings so you don't make all the noise that I made over the course of this lesson. That can be even more boring than this was possibly, because with muting, it's such an important thing to learn how to not make noise, especially when you're dealing with overdriven sounds or high gain sounds, a little bit louder stuff. It's really important to make sure there's not excess noise, because it'll make the notes you are playing clearer. So that's even more boring because you're not even playing at that point. You're learning how to not play things. So I think that's about, and then there's like harmonics, just go over a fret, not in the middle of a fret, but go over a fret, pick it, creates this like nice kind of, I wouldn't say nice, but cool sort of ringing sound. And then bending, just taking a note and just literally bending the strings. Sure, yeah, so you have the natural harmonics right here, and then pinch harmonics would be, and you really have to kind of choke the pick off a little bit. Basically what you're doing is you're picking it, and then you're touching it, sort of cutting off the note with your by touching it with your finger, and it's hard to kind of do slow. See that? And I'm like touching the string like that. See that? So fast, it's like, yeah, not like that. And it depends on where you're hitting it. So I get the cleanest harmonics like right by the pickups. And then you can do an upstroke with it where you're touching it with your index finger, which I need more work with. So that's a hard thing to get. But once you get it, it winds up poking out, and you're playing quite a lot. And then we got bending, where we can bend up. If you have access to a whammy bar on your guitar, you can bend down a note. So you can go and bend a note down by pushing the whammy bar down. And what it does is it raises up your bridge, and it actually shortens the length of the string, and it's kind of like making your string a little slacker. And you can do a whole bunch of stuff with that. If this works, I might do a left-handed course. But So getting creative with this, just practice moving every exercise around, or every concept really. They're not really exercises, just more like concepts that you can make your own exercises. Start really slow with everything. Just keep it steady. Try and keep it rhythmic, because all the like picking hand really fits more into rhythm playing. And rhythm, if you want to go into career in music, it's 95% of what you're going to be doing. You're not really going to be like all the time. Start slow, learn your scales, chords, intervals, learn more about theory. It's really, once you get a hang on theory, it is pretty easy. It can get a little complicated, but like just the basics of music theory are really simple to understand once you get it under your fingers. Practice moving in between techniques, so like practice combining them. Listen to a lot of different music. Just listen. And when you do listen, don't like measure your own skill or development against others. That's not what we do or what we should do. You know, it's hard not to sometimes, but like you just gotta stay humble and be cool. Just enjoy the process. And that's all I got. So anybody have any questions? Anyone? Bueller?
I unmuted everyone. Feel free
Thank
to
you.
talk.
And Charlie. Yeah.
Glad you can make it.
Hey, I have a question.
Jay?
Yeah, that's me. Hey, I was wondering for tips for like with the fretting hand, sometimes I get a little bit of an ache in my thumb. Any like tips for like holding with the fretting hand to kind of reduce pain in the thumb?
Yeah, so I just like to keep my thumb behind my index finger at all times. Like,
Okay.
I don't like to drift it over like this. I see my 6-year-olds and my 8-year-olds, they'll bring the thumb over here. I'm like, what are you doing? No. Really depends on the size of your hand. So again, I have tiny hands, so I usually wind up gripping it usually either the middle, right around the radian, and then maybe I'll post up, like if I'm doing more upper strings, sometimes I'll post up like a little bit lower, almost around the curve of the bottom. So it really depends. Like you saw right there, like sometimes I'll bend it like this. Really do what's comfortable with you. Just the way my hands bone structure is set up, like I can't really keep directly in line all the time. When I come up here, usually I'll wind up bringing my thumb a little bit back, bringing my knuckle almost behind, and then bringing my thumb more up here. And like there's a ton of different spots. So there's kind of like the cupping around with your thumb, sort of just fitting the curve into the curve of your hand. There's directly posting it up like that, all kinds of different stuff. Really depends on your hand's bone structure and what's comfortable for you. So if it strains your hand, try and think about shifting it over a little bit. Good question.
Great, thanks.
Also, Jay, real quick, he's using the pick I was telling you about last night in lessons, you know, which has got the thicker pick. It's got a real sharp point. Now, the one that Charlie's using is the one I was trying to tell you about last night. Those kind of picks. See how sharp it is at the edge? It's a smaller pick. Real pointy.
This one's even rounded off a little bit.
Real hard.
I use it a lot. But yeah, these are and you can see the logo. I've used it so much the logos come off with my sweat. But this is a Dunlop Jazz 3. Got introduced to these like, I want to say like 3 or 4 years ago, and I love them. Good place to start is the Jazz 3 Variety Pack. They offer it at Guitar Center and Music and Arts. And it's just a bunch of different thicknesses and different feels. Like some have this like little grip, like web grip on there. I think the widest it gets like is a 2 mil. Some people even go over that. Like Richie Faulkner, one of my favorite guitarists right now, he uses a 3 mil, which just seems absurd to me.
Yeah.
But he like really likes his chunk on the bottom end.
So
but yeah,
Jay's genre of choice is, you know, like kind of the more heavy metal, fast picking stuff. And I was telling him that those type of picks might help him increase speed and accuracy just because they're a little pointier. Do you agree with that?
100%. Also thickness matters because like if I wonder if I have any around. Yeah, I have like one of the flimsy Guitar Center picks.
Yeah.
One of the things with the thinner picks is like, see how easy that bends? When you pick the string, it bends like that too. And that momentum can throw off your picking. With a thicker pick, you know, I'm really cranking it there. I don't want to break it, but it's a lot less malleable. All right. So you just get a little bit more control with it. And also, we didn't talk too much about pick position, but I'm not coming in completely parallel to the strings. I'm not, depending on what I'm doing, sometimes when I really want a chunky bottom end, I'll flatten the pick out because that thickens up your sound a little bit. And this is a single coil guitar, so it's not really going to chunk like I want it to, but versus that. It's a small difference, but it's there. But when I'm alternate picking, I'm not really going flat like this. I'm usually at least giving a slight angle. Now it changes depending on what string you're on. Like if you're on the low string, you want to flatten it out a little bit more, but I'm not going completely flat, right? I'm turning it a little more. Probably the difference between like 15, I want to say 15 degrees and like a 30 degrees if I'm up here. So it's really, again, it's something you just want to practice with, and if you feel one way is working for you, work with that. Biggest thing I can stress is that the angle you hit the strings with, it changes whether you're going up or down. So again, when I'm going up, I'm going a lot flatter. And then when I'm coming back down, I'm usually coming a little bit more diagonally, even when I'm going like this. See, even when I flatten it out like that, I'm sort of using the edge a little bit too. So there's all kinds of stuff with that. The best thing to get it straight is to try the down picking, the upstrokes, the alternate picking, and then the triplets. So downstroke, you know, think Metallica. Upstrokes was also actually used by Dimebag and Pantera a lot. He does a lot of riffs with upstrokes. Alternate picking, like classic thrash bands, classic heavy metal. And then triplets, probably my favorite band of all time, Iron Maiden. Again, it doesn't crunch that hard because single coil guitar and tiny amp. Don't want to overload the speaker. But yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
Anybody have any other questions? Luke, anything?
I got nothing.
That's it for me. Thank you.
No problem. All right. I think we'll call it then. I'm again, like, I think Steve's gonna make the whole video available if anybody wants to go back and revisit stuff. I'm gonna send the PowerPoint. Maybe we can work on getting the PowerPoint uploaded too.
Yep.
All right.
Great job. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for coming on the Saturday
Charlie.
afternoon. Hope everybody has a good weekend. Happy Memorial Day. Stay safe.